Well, in our last edition of Social Business, we talked about the delay in the establishment of the new charity regulator, the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. The regulatory reforms are now being staged over a couple of years. Peter Shergold, we are starting to get a bit of an idea of the regulatory powers, aren't we?
We are, and it's quite interesting. So the interim regulator, the task force, has now put out a paper. It's talking about a regulatory pyramid. And what they're trying to get at is at the bottom there are a large numbers of charities who are striving to do the right thing. And therefore the regulator will work with them to provide them with support and assistance. And they're emphasising that's the bulk of what they'll be doing in the sector.
The idea of the pyramid, tell us kind of how that works, especially as it relates to, punishment for when things aren't done properly.
So at the bottom of the pyramid, it's OK. These are the great bulk who just need to be given support and assistance as charities. But at the top, these are the organisations about which there might be alleged breaches. And there it gets pretty serious. It will be clear that the regulator's going to have compulsory powers to get information, be able to give warnings, directions, enforcement undertakings, injunctions, and I suppose at the very point it will reach a stage at which some charities would be suspended or deregistered.
And what's been the reaction to that you've been able to gauge?
I think there is a general understanding that that's necessary, but there is this wanting to have further discussions about, well, just how will this operate? And even when you're giving support and assistance, is that actually going to start to put more additional red tape onto the charitable sector?
Sure. We speak all the time on the Business Channel, of course, about economic conditions worsening in Australia, but it's also clear from a recent report about the growing number of low-income families who are really struggling to even access financial services which are actually affordable to them, which is pretty troubling.
It is. I mean, I guess we take financial services just as granted. There's a second annual report that's come out done by the NAB Bank and CSI looking at financial exclusion. What it finds is that there are about 17% of adult Australians, that's about 3 million people, who are in effect financially excluded, who do not have the normal range of banking services, particularly when they need to borrow money, even small amounts of money. Now, maybe that's not surprising, because if you look at the cost of a basic cheque account and a no-frills credit card, that's about $900 a year. Well, maybe it doesn't seem much, but if you actually look at the bottom 13% of Australians, that's 15% of income. So what you find is many of these families do not get access to the formal financial services. So what do when they don't have money? They go to what are called payday lenders, who will lend them money for a week, 2 weeks, at very high rates.
Yeah, and that's kind of dangerous, isn't it? Is this data reliable? Is it trustworthy?
Yeah, I think it is. It's unbelievable, this data. It's actually based upon interviews with 60,000 bank customers, and then it took 661 who were identified as financially excluded and had much more detailed telephone interviews with them. So it's a pretty reliable set of statistics.
Peter, there's also been an interesting study that's just been published, and it gives some indications about how Australians actually give to charity when they die. So
this is really interesting. This came out of Swinburne University. What it shows is that 1 in 20 Australians, that's only 5%, actually leave money to charity in their wills. Now, to put that in perspective, we know that 87% of Australians give to charity in some way each year. Only 5% give. And in fact, if you look at the 5% who leave money to charity in their will, their characteristic is that they tend to be childless families.
Oh, interesting.
So essentially what's happening is Australians are leaving their money to their children rather than setting aside any money for charity. And that's very different from the United States or the United Kingdom. And you do start to think, well, this is one of the side effects of having an economy in which we don't have an inheritance tax, we don't have death duties. So you've got none of that incentive you get in the US and the UK to try and think as you plan your affairs for when you die, well, is there some of this money we can leave to charity? Because otherwise quite a lot of it will go to the state.